7 months after my husband's funeral, my son Mark held me down in our barn while my daughter Taylor beat me with Donald's old leather belt. "Sign the papers, Mom," she demanded between strikes. "The farm is worth $8 million. We can all be rich." But what they didn't know was that Donald had left me a letter warning me this day would come. My name is Hillary Caldwell, and at 70 years old, I thought I'd seen the worst life could offer when I buried my husband Donald on a cold February morning in Richmond, Virginia. I was wrong. The worst was yet to come, and it would arrive wearing the faces of my own children. The attack happened on a humid September evening, 7 months after we'd laid Donald to rest in the small cemetery behind our farmhouse. I'd been out in the barn checking on our old mare, Buttercup, when Taylor and Marc cornered me near the hay bales. The barn smelled of sweet feed and leather, scents that had comforted me for decades. But that night, they became the backdrop for my own children's betrayal. "Mom, we need to talk," Taylor had said, her voice carrying that crisp corporate tone she'd perfected during her years in real estate development in downtown Richmond. She was holding a thick manila folder and wearing the kind of expression she probably used in boardroom takeovers. "Can't it wait until we're back at the house?" I'd asked, noting how Marc kept shifting nervously behind his sister, avoiding my eyes. Something felt wrong. The air was too still, too charged with an energy I couldn't name. "No, it can't wait," Taylor snapped. "You've been avoiding this conversation for months. Black Rock Estates has made us an offer for the farm. $8 million, Mom. $8 million. Do you understand what that means?" I understood perfectly. It meant the end of everything Donald and I had built together over 40 years of marriage. Our 1,200 acres of rolling Virginia farmland, with its century-old oak trees and the creek that ran clear and cold even in the driest summers. The land where we'd raised our children, where Donald had taught them to ride horses and fish for bass in the pond. The place where we'd planned to grow old together, watching our grandchildren play in the same fields where their parents had grown up. "This land isn't for sale," I said firmly. "Your father and I built this place with our own hands. Every fence post, every building, every acre of pasture. It's not just property, it's our legacy." That's when Taylor's mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Legacy doesn't pay for Marc's gambling debts or my divorce settlement, Mom. Legacy doesn't pay for anything. We need that money, and we need it now." I tried to walk past them toward the barn door, but Marc stepped into my path. My son, who'd once been a gentle boy who cried when he accidentally stepped on a beetle, now towered over me with shoulders squared for confrontation. "Get out of my way, Marc," I said quietly. "Sign the papers, Mom," he said, his voice hollow. "Just sign them. It'll be easier for everyone." When I shook my head and tried to push past him, he grabbed my arms. Not roughly at first, but firmly enough to stop me. That's when Taylor opened the manila folder and pulled out Donald's old leather belt, the one he'd worn every day for 20 years until cancer took his strength away. "You always said this belt kept Dad in line," Taylor said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The beating wasn't born of rage. Rage is hot and messy. This was cold, calculated coercion delivered with Donald's worn leather belt by the children I'd raised to be better than this. Each strike was precise, methodical, designed to break my spirit without leaving marks that would show beneath my clothes. Taylor counted each blow like she was tallying quarterly profits. 1. Will you sign? 2. How about now? 3. Getting tired yet? Marc held my arms behind my back, his grip firm but not brutal. I could feel him trembling, could hear his shallow breathing. He didn't want to be there, but he was there nonetheless, complicit in his sister's cruelty. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they left me collapsed among the hay bales, the contract scattered beside me. "Think about it overnight, Mom," Taylor called back as they walked toward the house. "We'll discuss this again in the morning, and next time we won't be so patient." I lay there in the gathering darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the farm settling for the night. Buttercup nickered softly from her stall, as if asking if I was all right. I wasn't all right. My back burned where the belt had landed, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest. My children, the babies I'd nursed through midnight fevers, the toddlers I taught to walk, the teenagers I defended against every criticism, had just beaten me like a disobedient animal. But as I struggled to my feet, brushing hay from my clothes, I remembered something Donald had told me the night before he died. He'd been weak then, the cancer having stolen most of his strength, but his mind was still sharp. "Hillary," he'd whispered, gripping my hand with what little strength he had left, "if anything happens to me, if the wolves come to the door wearing our children's faces, remember the letters. I left you letters, and the old toolbox in the workshop, the red one with the rusted latch. Everything you need to know is there." I'd thought he was delirious from the morphine, but now, limping across the barnyard toward his workshop, I wondered if Donald had seen something in our children that I'd been too blind to notice. The workshop smelled of sawdust and motor oil, exactly as Donald had left it. His tools hung in perfect order on pegboard walls, each one in its designated place. The red toolbox sat on his workbench, covered in a thin layer of dust. Inside, beneath his favorite screwdrivers and the small hammer he'd used for delicate work, I found 3 sealed envelopes marked with my name in Donald's careful handwriting. The first letter was dated 6 months before his death. "My dearest Hillary, if you're reading this, the wolves have come to the door, and I fear they may be wearing our children's faces. I've seen the way Taylor looks at the land assessments when she thinks I'm not watching. I've heard Mark on the phone talking about his debts. They don't see this place the way we do. To them, it's just an asset to be liquidated. But this farm is more than property, our life's work, our love made manifest in soil and stone. Don't let them take it from you. Fight them with their own weapons. Be smarter, be harder, be whatever you need to be to keep our legacy safe." The second letter contains specific instructions and contact information. "John Mitchell, the Old Town clerk, knows about agricultural preservation easements. Call him. Julia Cuomo is the lawyer you need. They call her the Dragon for good reason. She's expensive but worth every penny. The farm is worth more protected than developed. Trust no one else with this information until you're ready to strike." The third letter was the shortest but the most important. "Remember what I taught you about fighting bullies, my love. You don't meet strength with strength, you meet it with strategy. Let them think they're winning until it's too late for them to change course. I love you, Hillary. Save our home." I folded the letters carefully and tucked them into my apron pocket. Donald had known this day would come, and he'd armed me for the battle ahead. My children thought they were dealing with a grieving, confused old woman. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who'd learned strategy from a man who'd outmaneuvered every challenge life had thrown at us. The next morning, I became an actress. When Taylor and Marc came to the kitchen for breakfast, they found me hunched over a cup of coffee, wearing the same clothes from the night before, my gray hair disheveled and my eyes red-rimmed. I'd practiced the pose in the bathroom mirror, the perfect picture of a broken old woman who'd been beaten into submission. "Morning, Mom," Taylor said cautiously, studying my face for signs of continued defiance. "How are you feeling today?" I looked up at her with what I hoped appeared to be defeated resignation. "Tired," I said in a voice barely above a whisper. So very tired of fighting. Marc shifted uncomfortably by the coffee pot, still unable to meet my eyes. Good, his guilt would be useful. "We don't want to fight either, Mom," Taylor said, settling into the chair across from me with practiced sympathy. "We just want what's best for everyone. The BlackRock offer is generous, more than generous. $8 million would set us all up for life." I nodded slowly, as if considering her words for the first time. $8 million, I repeated. That's a lot of money." "It is," Taylor agreed, leaning forward eagerly. "Think about what you could do with your share. You could buy a nice condo in Richmond, closer to medical care. You could travel, see the world. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big old farm anymore." "The farm is a lot of work," I said, letting doubt creep into my voice.
Your father always handled the business side of things. I'm not sure I know how to manage it alone." This was exactly what Taylor wanted to hear. I could see the relief in her posture, the way her shoulders relaxed as she sensed victory within reach. "That's exactly right, Mom. Dad handled everything, and now it's too much for you. It's not fair to expect you to carry that burden alone." I spent the next 3 days playing the part of the overwhelmed widow, asking confused questions about property taxes and maintenance costs, expressing worry about managing the farm's finances. All the while, I was making careful phone calls when my children were out of the house. John Mitchell, the former town clerk, was in his 80s but still sharp as a tack. He remembered Donald fondly and was outraged when I explained the situation. "Agricultural conservation easements," he said firmly over the phone. "That's your answer, Hillary. You can protect the farm from development forever while maintaining ownership." Julia Cuomo is the lawyer you need. She's handled dozens of these cases. The tax benefits alone will make it financially advantageous, and BlackRock Estates will have to find somewhere else to build their McMansions. Julia Cuomo was indeed everything Donald had promised. Even over the phone, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to winning. When I explained my situation, she listened without interruption. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said when I'd finished, "what your children are attempting constitutes elder abuse and financial exploitation. We're going to stop them, but we need to be strategic about it. Can you continue your performance for another week while I prepare the documentation?" I assured her I could. After 40 years of marriage to a man who'd taught me that the best defense is a good offense, I was just getting started.
Taylor made the call to social services on a Friday morning, exactly as I'd known she would. I'd been watching her for days, seeing the growing impatience in her movements, the way she checked her phone constantly for updates from BlackRock Estates. The developers were pressuring her for a decision, and she was feeling the walls closing in. "Yes, I'd like to report a concern about an elderly person," I heard her say from the kitchen phone, not bothering to lower her voice because she thought I was napping upstairs. "My mother, Hillary Caldwell, she's 70 years old and living alone on a large farm. Since my father passed away, she's become increasingly confused and paranoid. She's refusing necessary medical care and making irrational decisions about her property. I'm worried about her safety and mental state." I listened from the top of the stairs, recording every word on the small digital recorder Julia Cuomo had given me. Taylor was building a case for having me declared incompetent, paving the way for my children to take control of my assets through conservatorship. It was a clever plan, if it had been true. The social services evaluator, a kind woman named Patricia Williams, arrived the following Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I made sure to be in the kitchen when she knocked, wearing my best dress and with my hair neatly arranged. The house was spotless, fresh flowers on the table, and the smell of homemade bread filling the air. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Patricia asked, her notebook already in hand. "I'm here to follow up on a report we received about your welfare." "Of course, dear," I said warmly. "Please come in. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." I could see her taking in the details, the immaculate house, my clear speech and steady movements, the obvious signs of someone fully capable of caring for herself. This wasn't what she'd expected based on Taylor's report. Taylor and Marc arrived 15 minutes later, as they'd arranged with Patricia. They were clearly surprised to find me alert, well-dressed, and engaging in coherent conversation about current events and farm management. "Mom's having one of her good days," Taylor said quickly, settling into damage control mode. "But you should see her on the bad days. She gets confused, forgets to eat, talks to my dead father like he's still here." "I talk to your father every night," I said calmly. "It brings me comfort. Is that a crime?" Patricia Williams was taking notes, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. She'd been doing this job long enough to recognize the difference between genuine cognitive decline and family manipulation. "Mrs. Caldwell," Patricia said, "can you tell me about your daily routine? How do you manage the farm operations?" For the next 30 minutes, I walked her through my responsibilities, managing the farm's finances, coordinating with the hay contractor, overseeing the care of our remaining livestock. I showed her the detailed records I kept,
the maintenance schedules, the tax documents, all properly filed and organized. "Mom, you're making it sound easier than it is," Mark interjected nervously. "Remember last week when you couldn't find the deed to the north pasture?" "I found it exactly where it was supposed to be," I replied evenly, "in the filing cabinet under property deeds. Perhaps you were looking in the wrong place." That's when Taylor played what she thought was her ace card. "Miss Williams, my mother is being taken advantage of by unscrupulous people who want to prevent her from making sound financial decisions. She's refusing a very generous offer to sell this property, which would provide her with financial security for the rest of her life." "And who made this offer?" Patricia asked. "Black Rock Estates, $8 million for land that's becoming too much for her to handle." Patricia turned to me. "Mrs. Caldwell, how do you feel about this offer?" This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I reached into my apron pocket and placed the small recording device on the table, pressing play. Taylor's voice filled the room. "Legacy doesn't pay for Mark's gambling debts or my divorce settlement, Mom. Legacy doesn't pay for anything. We need that money, and we need it now." Then Mark's voice. "Sign the papers, Mom. Just sign them. It'll be easier for everyone." And finally, the sound that would haunt my children's nightmares. The whistle of Donald's belt cutting through the air, followed by my muffled cries. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia Williams stared at the device, then at my children, her professional composure cracking for the first time. "Miss Williams," I said quietly, "you asked about elder abuse. I believe you've just heard it."
Julia Cuomo arrived at the farm the next morning like an avenging angel dressed in a tailored business suit. She was smaller than I'd expected, probably no more than 5 feet tall, but she radiated the kind of controlled power that made the air itself seem to vibrate with potential energy. I understood immediately why they called her the Dragon. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, setting her briefcase on my kitchen table with the precision of a general deploying troops, "your children have made several serious mistakes. First, they underestimated you. Second, they committed their crimes in front of a witness. Third, they documented their intentions in written contracts and recorded conversations. I've built stronger cases on far less evidence." Taylor and Marc had spent the night at the farm, afraid to leave me alone after Patricia Williams' visit. They'd been whispering urgently in the living room since dawn, no doubt trying to figure out how to minimize the damage from yesterday's revelation. When they saw Julia arrive, they came into the kitchen like condemned prisoners approaching the gallows. "Who are you?" Taylor demanded, though her usual corporate confidence was notably absent. "Julia Cuomo, attorney at law," Julia replied, without looking up from the documents she was arranging on the table. "I represent your mother in matters related to elder abuse, property fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Please sit down. We have much to discuss." "Now, wait just a minute," Mark started, but Julia's sharp look cut him off mid-sentence. "Mr. Caldwell, you and your sister have approximately 30 seconds to decide whether you want to resolve this matter quietly or explain your actions to a federal prosecutor. Elder abuse is a federal crime when it involves financial exploitation. Assault and battery are state crimes. Conspiracy to commit fraud adds another layer of complexity. Shall I continue?" I watched my children's faces as the reality of their situation sank in. Taylor, always the strategist, was calculating odds and options. Mark just looked sick. "What do you want?" Taylor asked finally. Julia smiled, and I understood why even seasoned criminals found her intimidating. "What I want is irrelevant. What your mother wants is very simple. She wants you to leave her property immediately and never return. She wants you to withdraw any and all claims to this farm, and she wants you to never contact her again unless she initiates the contact." "And if we refuse?" Taylor asked, though we all knew she was bluffing. Julia opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder.
Then I file these criminal complaints with the district attorney's office this afternoon. I also file a civil suit for damages, including pain and suffering, medical expenses, and punitive damages. Given that your mother's property is worth approximately $8 million, and given the severity of your actions, I'd estimate the punitive damages alone at $15 to $20 million. The mathematical impossibility of paying such a judgment wasn't lost on Taylor. Her corporate training had taught her to recognize unwinnable situations. "We need time to think," she said. "You have until noon," replied, checking her watch. "After that, I assume you've chosen the difficult path and act accordingly." After my children left the kitchen, Julia turned to me with a warmer expression. "Mrs. Caldwell, I know this is painful, but we need to discuss the long-term protection of your property. Your children may retreat for now, but greed has a way of returning with reinforcements. What do you suggest?" "An agricultural conservation easement. It will permanently protect the farm from development while allowing you to retain ownership and residence rights. The tax benefits will actually improve your financial situation, and Black Rock Estates will have to find somewhere else to build their subdivisions." I thought about Donald's letters, about his warnings and his wisdom. How long does the process take? If we move quickly, we can have the paperwork filed within a week. Once it's in place, no one, not your children, not any future heirs, not any court, can force the development of this land. It will remain a working farm forever. "Then let's do it," I said. "Donald always said the land was worth more than money. It's time to prove him right."
At exactly 11:30, Taylor and Marc returned to the kitchen. They moved like people walking to their own execution, all the fight drained out of them. Taylor carried a single piece of paper, what I assumed was their surrender. "We'll leave," Taylor said without preamble, "but we want you to know that this isn't over. When you die, when you're too old to fight anymore, we'll contest everything. We'll claim you were incompetent, that you were manipulated by lawyers and outsiders. We'll drag this through the courts for years." I looked at my daughter, this woman who had once been the little girl who picked wildflowers for my birthday and cried when her goldfish died, and felt a sadness deeper than any physical pain they'd inflicted. "Taylor," I said quietly, "sit down." Something in my tone made her comply despite herself. Marc took the chair beside her, both of them looking like children called to account for breaking a window. "Your father saw this coming," I began, pulling Donald's letters from my apron pocket. "He knew what you were planning before you knew it yourselves. He left me these letters, along with specific instructions on how to protect our home from you." I read them the relevant passages, watching their faces as they realized the depth of Donald's foresight and the futility of their schemes. "The agricultural easement will be filed tomorrow morning," I continued. "This farm will be protected from development for all time. When I die, it will pass to the Virginia Agricultural Trust, where it will continue operating as a working farm and educational center. You will inherit exactly what you've earned through your actions, nothing." Marc spoke for the first time since entering the kitchen. "Mom, we know we screwed up, but we're still your children. We're still family." "No," I said firmly. "Family doesn't beat each other with leather belts. Family doesn't try to steal each other's homes. Family doesn't conspire to have each other declared incompetent for financial gain. You stopped being my children the moment you raised your hands against me in that barn." Taylor's composure finally cracked. "You can't cut us off completely. We have rights. We have needs. Marc owes money to dangerous people, and my divorce." "Your problems are not my problems," I interrupted. "You created your difficulties through your own choices, and you'll solve them the same way. This farm, this land that you thought you could sell out from under me, will never be yours. It will never be anyone's to sell or develop or destroy." Julia Cuomo, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, you have exactly 5 minutes to remove yourselves from this property before I call the sheriff's department. Any attempt to return will result in trespassing charges being filed immediately." My children left without another word. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded their few belongings into Taylor's BMW and drove away down the gravel road that Donald and I had laid ourselves 40 years ago. I expected to feel triumph, or relief, or vindication. Instead, I felt a profound emptiness, as if something vital had been carved out of my chest. But as the dust from their departure settled and the farm returned to its natural quiet, I realized that the emptiness wasn't loss, it was space. Space for something new to grow. The months that followed were the strangest of my life. The farm felt both empty and full, lonely and peaceful. Without the constant tension of my children's presence, without the fear of their schemes, the old house seemed to exhale and settle into a more comfortable rhythm. Julia Cuomo completed the agricultural easement paperwork with ruthless efficiency. By October, the farm was legally protected from development forever. BlackRock Estates withdrew their offer and moved on to easier targets. The tax benefits from the conservation easement actually improved my financial situation, proving Donald right about the land being worth more protected than developed. But the real transformation began when Dr. Sarah Chen from Virginia Tech's Agricultural Extension Program contacted me about using the farm as a teaching site for their sustainable farming students. The idea of young people learning on the land that Donald and I had worked for 4 decades appealed to me immediately. The first group of students arrived in early spring, 6 eager young people who treated the farm like a sacred trust. They asked endless questions about soil composition and crop rotation, about the history of the buildings and the stories behind the old-growth oak trees. For the first time in months, I heard laughter echoing across the pastures. Working with them reminded me why Donald and I had fallen in love with farming in the first place. It wasn't about the money or the property values or the development potential. It was about the connection between human hands and living soil, about the satisfaction of growing something useful and beautiful, about being part of something larger and more enduring than any individual life. I started teaching workshops on traditional farming methods, sharing the knowledge Donald and I had accumulated over 40 years. The students called me Grandma Hillary and brought me vegetables from the gardens they'd planted using techniques I'd taught them. Their enthusiasm was infectious, their respect for the land genuine. By summer, the farm was busier than it had been in years, but with a different kind of energy. Instead of the tension and resentment that had characterized my children's presence, the air buzzed with curiosity and hope. The students worked hard, learned eagerly, and treated me like a valued teacher rather than an inconvenient obstacle. I heard from Taylor and Marc only once more. A lawyer representing them contacted Julia Cuomo, threatening to contest the agricultural easement and demanding their rightful inheritance. Julia's response was swift and definitive. Any further harassment would result in the full criminal charges being filed, charges that had been held in abeyance only as long as they honored their agreement to stay away. The lawyer never contacted us again. As I write this, it's been 2 years since my children tried to steal my farm. The land that Taylor and Marc wanted to sell to BlackRock Estates for luxury housing now hosts 24 agricultural students each semester, along with weekend workshops that draw farmers and gardeners from across Virginia. The old barn where they beat me now houses a seed library and classroom where young people learn about heritage varieties and sustainable practices. I'm 72 years old now, and I wake up every morning to the sound of students working in the fields, their voices carrying across the pastures like a promise of continuity. They've planted an orchard behind the house, apple and pear trees that will produce fruit long after I'm gone. They've restored the old greenhouse and filled it with seedlings that will become food for families I'll never meet. The farm is no longer just my home. It's become something Donald always dreamed it could be, a living classroom where the next generation learns to work with the land instead of against it. The agricultural easement ensures it will remain that way forever, no matter what happens to me or to the children who wanted to sell it for subdivisions. I still think about Taylor and Marc sometimes, wondering if they found their way to better choices.
But I've learned that you can't save people from themselves, no matter how much you love them. The best you can do is protect what matters and hope that somewhere, somehow, they find their own path to redemption. The farm will outlive us all, the developers who wanted to destroy it, the children who wanted to sell it, and the old woman who fought to save it. In the end, that's what Donald meant when he said the land was worth more than money. It's not about the price per acre or the property values or the development potential. It's about the continuity, the connection between past and future, the knowledge that something good and growing will persist beyond our small human ambitions. I'm Hillary Caldwell. I'm 72 years old, and I saved my farm from my own children. The land they wanted to sell for $8 million is now worth something far more valuable. It's priceless, protected, and permanent. And every morning when I see those young farmers working in the fields my husband and I planted, I know Donald would be proud. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't about what you gain, but about what you refuse to lose. Sometimes saving the land means saving yourself. And sometimes, when your own children come for your legacy, the best response is to make sure that legacy outlasts them all. The farm will outlive us all, the developers who wanted to destroy it, the children who wanted to sell it, and the old woman who fought to save it. In the end, that's what Donald meant when he said the land was worth more than money. It's not about the price per acre or the property values or the development potential. It's about the continuity, the connection between past and future, the knowledge that something good and growing will persist beyond our small human ambitions. I'm Hillary Caldwell. I'm 72 years old, and I saved my farm from my own children. The land they wanted to sell for $8 million is now worth something far more valuable. It's priceless, protected, and permanent. And every morning when I see those young farmers working in the fields my husband and I planted, I know Donald would be proud. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't about what you gain, but about what you refuse to lose. Sometimes saving the land means saving yourself. And sometimes, when your own children come for your legacy, the best response is to make sure that legacy outlasts them all.